hiddenaway.com.
Talk 1470 is WWNN Pompano Beach and 95.3 FM W237BD Boca Raton. The Health and Wealth Radio Network. 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. The Health and Wealth Radio Network. Wake up with the Steve Kane Show.
Just tell me what your problem is.
With replays overnight, every night. WNN. Talk health. Talk wealth. Talk politics. Talk 1470 and 95.3 FM WNN.
Want to lower your rate and payments? Get rid of mortgage insurance or get cash out? Find out about your best refinance options by tuning into the Get Mortgage Fit radio show with Alex Michaels and Carrie Kasem, Monday mornings from 10 to 11, where you'll learn everything you need to know about mortgage loans, today's rates, FHA, VA, and more. Call the Get Mortgage Fit show Monday mornings from 10 to 11 on WNN at 800-827-RATE. 800-827-RATE or visit them online at newamericanfunding.com. NMLS 6606.
1470 AM and 95.3 FM. The Health and Wealth Radio Network. Get it straight from the expert's mouth on Ask the Experts with host Steve O. Every Thursday at 5 p.m.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9. Time for Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel, a certified sex therapist and sexuality educator. Dr. Siegel is here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality that you might not have known who to ask. He'll also welcome special guests to talk about a wide variety of topics within the fascinating world of sexuality. So, welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Richard Siegel, a certified sex therapist. With me, as always, my brother, Larry Siegel, certified sexuality educator. Thanks for joining me.
Always a pleasure. Good evening.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it's a good weekend. Still glowing for some great music that we had the pleasure of enjoying yesterday.
Indeed.
The Sunshine Music Festival. Right? And shout out to everybody that was there. It was a great time.
Indeed. Yeah.
Right. And how are you doing?
Well, tired. I'm happy to announce that we're coming to the end, finally, of this burden for the past year, co-editing a textbook on sex therapy supervision. And very happy to announce that our guest this evening is my co-editor in that endeavor, brilliant Philadelphia sex therapist and professor at Lincoln University, Dr. James Wadley, will be calling in a few minutes.
Looking forward to that.
It's a great, exhausting project, as you know, as one of the editors.
Yes.
For the editors. It's not easy. One of the chapter authors said, no, you have to understand, writers love having written. They don't love writing.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, writing sucks.
Yeah, and there's really nothing good to say about editing. So.
Yeah. But it's been a really exciting project to be able to reach out to some of the best and brightest minds in the field, some real giants,
Indeed.
Some real pioneers, and have them write chapters. And we've kind of thrown it together and written a couple chapters of our own. As you know, and anyone who's ever listened to the show, the one particular issue is near and dear to our collection of pet peeves.
Yes.
The sex addiction industry.
Oh, yeah.
And the controversies, the debates around even what to call, no less how to treat problematic sexual behaviors.
Right, which, by the way, we are going to be doing at least an entire show on, if probably not several.
Next week, yes, our guest will be Dr. David Lay, who wrote the book called The Myth of Sex Addiction, which kind of...
He literally wrote the book on it.
Which kind of set the field in motion, and the controversy, really, because as we talk about a lot on the show, sex addiction is very appealing. As a concept, it's easy. It lets people off the hook very often, and especially as a lot of the research is showing, there seems to be a connection to the more conservative and religious someone is, the more guilty they feel about something like looking at porn.
Absolutely.
They're more likely to say, I'm an addict, I'm an addict.
Sure.
And it's easier to, admit to having some sickness than to admit to having a less than perfect marriage.
Or it's easier to be sick than responsible. It's another part of that as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Wadley, I understand you're on the phone with us.
I am on the phone. Hello, and how are you?
Good.
Hey there,
good.
how are
Thank
you?
you so much. I know this couldn't have been a worse week for either of us, so thanks for taking the time out, and I hope your dad is well. I know it's been
Yeah,
crazy
thank
all
you
around.
for that. Thanks for having me. I literally just walked in the door, and I was trying to get online so that way I could see you good folks, but because I'm not technologically savvy, it just didn't happen.
We
But
got you on the phone. That's great.
Yep. That works. And it's nice to almost finally meet you.
Oh yeah, you guys haven't.
That's right,
met
we've
yet.
never met.
That's crazy. We'll take care of that in Denver.
Yes.
Right.
Denver, we will meet.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So I had the pleasure of meeting this brilliant man right at the same time that we had the chance to work together, co-supervising the pre-conference session in Puerto Rico.
Right.
Our
That's the one I
annual
couldn't go
sex
to.
therapy conference, and got the gig last year again in Las Vegas, and the hat trick. We just were invited to do it again in Denver. So, James, looking forward to being able to do that with you again.
Which is cool.
Yeah, and then in between, we got invited to work on this book, and crazy but not so crazy with everything we talk about. That in all this time, it hasn't occurred to anybody to put together a textbook for the most critical part of the training of sex therapists, supervising them in action while they're working on their cases and working with patients to become sex therapists.
Right. And I'm looking forward to this also being the first,
The first,
not the last.
Yeah, hopefully. There's enough. There's a lot of people that we couldn't get to submit, or we wanted to have their voice in. So, yeah, James, we're already a little optimistic for a volume 2. I guess we could say that, right?
Yeah. What was nice about this opportunity was that, we had a number of professionals in the field who, we had known over the years. And actually, in this case, I was riding on Ricky's coattails. And, Ricky knows everybody from Shining Sea. So, it made at least my portion of this venture somewhat easy. And it was nice because we have so many different voices and, so many different areas of expertise in the field to, give resonance towards sex therapy supervision. I'm really looking forward to the final product coming out.
Indeed. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you if you could, at first, I'm not sure I got all the backstory. Tell us a little bit, and our listeners, how you ended up as a sex therapist and as a supervisor, and were you thinking about it when you started your academic and then professional career?
Oh, wow. My story probably starts in high school. And for starters, it used to blow my mind how, I used to spend 2 and 3 hours every night talking on the phone to this person and that person. And I thought it would be pretty cool to finally make some money off of people telling me their business. So I knew very early that I wanted to go into the mental health profession. And so I went to Hampton University, which is down in Virginia. And long story short, I ended up doing my senior research project on children's toy choices, or why do little girls choose dolls and why do little boys choose trucks, and sometimes vice versa. So I left there and went to the University of Kentucky and continued my concentration in school psychology. And Kentucky wanted me to work for a year before I went for my doctorate. And plus, I was trying to get out of Kentucky because I was just trying to find my way. And I got a brochure from the University of Pennsylvania saying that they had a human sexuality and education program. I was like, oh, this is where I need to be to continue my research. So I got in, and it was the best 6 years of my life because my friends were anything other than black, middle-class, heterosexual, able-bodied Christian folks. And the people in my program, they really embraced me and allowed me to grow in many unimaginable ways. So I left Penn after 6 years in 2001, and then I did 4 years post grad work at Thomas Jefferson on counseling relationships, and that's probably the I guess the start of my doing sex therapy was there at UPenn, but began to develop a different kind of skill set at Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
So went through that program, and Philadelphia is the birthplace of marriage, couples, family, and systems therapy, and so I had a chance to work with many extraordinary people who were descendants of Virginia Satir and Salvador Minuchin and Jim Haley. And so we know about Nancy's system sex therapy book.
Right.
But here is Philadelphia truly is the birthplace. So I come from pretty good stock. And so years later, with regards to doing sex therapy, I got a call from ASEC, or the past president, Connie McCaffrey, who insisted that I come back to ASEC, or come to ASEC, because I was never there. And she says, James, we need more people of color. And I said, well, Connie, I'm already doing sex therapy. I don't necessarily need ASEC. And she said, no, but you have a responsibility to people who are coming in after you. And
wow,
so,
yeah. That old guilt trip,
yeah. I can see Connie saying that.
No, but
Connie, no.
Seriously, and James, I've shared this with you before, but I thought it was a real important and pivotal moment in ASEC's history. You were there. It would had to be at least a dozen, if not 15 years ago, at an ASEC conference. I don't know which city. They all kind of blend together.
At this point.
Our dear old friend Judith Steinhardt. Judith was the one that started Go Ask Alice at Columbia University way back, one of the first kind of Ask Me Anything sex information resources. And she stood up in this giant room with 600 sex therapists and basically called everybody out, called us out, and said, look around this room. Isn't it like conspicuously white and northeastern and narrow, and kind of put out the call. And so it's really been exciting over these at least dozen years to see ASEC changing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Last week we were talking about how millennials have surprised us in moving the dial so far and so quick. And I think it's fitting that same pattern that things have been changing for the better more quickly than we would have imagined.
I want to put something out there, though, particularly to everybody who's listening. James, and what you're describing, I hope something that comes out clearly for people. There's a common theme in what you're describing and what previous guests, and we talk about a lot, that people that do this work are very well trained. There are years of training. There are programs after programs, certifications, all this stuff that we have to go through. So, for people to just put themselves out there as sex therapists with no training and no credential, I think people need to really be aware that this is a legitimate field and a credential. And I don't think they would go to any other professional who just says they like doing the work but don't have the training and the education. So people kind of need to start thinking about that a little bit more when it comes to dealing with sexual issues.
Right, and I totally agree with that. I think it's one thing to go in to do sex therapy, but I think a good sex therapist knows not only the psychological substrates that may impact, sexual functioning, dysfunctioning, but also have a sense of the sociological and the ecological, and be able to use different theoretical models in order to provide effective therapy and effective treatment for clients.
Right.
And I think just like, and I was going to kind of dovetail into this, but just as diversity is intentional, so too is training around sex therapy, and that one must be intentional and have some sense of direction and endure the rigors over years and sessions and processing in order to get to a place to where one might be able to assume or increase the likelihood that one practices good sex therapy.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I want to jump in, kind of with that, dovetailing on that. I think again, this is a perfect day to be talking to you about this stuff, James, and talking about the intentionality. There is such an intersection that I think so often gets ignored between sexuality, sexual health, family issues, maternal child health issues. All of these intersect with social justice issues.
Absolutely.
And I don't think, again, you talk about being intentional, you talk about having these conversations. I don't think we're having that one enough.
You know, like we would say, the comedians are the last truth tellers. I think sexuality educators are the last social justice warriors.
You know, it would almost seem. Right? So how do you see that intersection, James?
I think sex educators, consultants, therapists, and counselors, we struggle with it, where we can readily talk about, obviously talk about sex and relationships and decision-making and psychology, sociology, whatever. But when it comes down to race, we struggle and we get really antsy about it. And one of the reasons we get antsy about it, obviously, is because of the collective history around systemic oppression. But then, two, we don't have enough practice and there isn't enough leeway to talk constructively about how race intersects with sexuality, race and ethnicity intersects with sexuality. I think that there are people of color who struggle with their own trauma, you know, dealing with life and systems and families and the injustices of, you know, being, I guess, in this society. But then for people who identify as Caucasian or European American or just white, they struggle with not having enough opportunities to talk constructively about it. So when you get people of color in the room and you get white folks in the room, you see either people avoiding the conversation or clashing head to head, and it's difficult for, you know, folks to just listen. I'll actually be in Nashville talking about the conversation around having the conversation around sex and sexuality, and just trying to bridge the divide and try to help people transcend the hurt and transcend some of the confusion around talking about it. And like I said, you know, we're good at having a SAR, or a sexual attitude reassessment, but then I had made the proposition in St. Louis that we need to have a racial attitude reassessment because that's where we struggle at.
Yeah.
That's where we really struggle at. So I haven't necessarily put it together, but I have a colleague who did, but that's where the conversation starts. We're just having a conversation about race.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's just a lot of, there's also this sort of tendril of political correctness that I think is also a barrier, because especially when you're talking about people that are not of color, there's a reticence, you know, and I think even people that are well-meaning are afraid of saying the wrong thing.
You mean that kind of liberal guilt?
Yeah, well,
that white liberal guilt?
It's more than, I mean, it's part of it, but it's more than just guilt. It's just, you know, people are afraid of being branded a racist. They're afraid of just saying the wrong thing or being accused of saying the wrong thing. Kind of related to a lot of this, I would even call white liberal guilt, is this fear of not being perceived as being liberal enough. Right? If I consider myself this way and I may say something that a person of color may take issue with, I may not be the sort of liberal I like to think of myself as. Right.
Right. We, you know, the Obama era, I hope I don't get too political, but I guess I do need to get some.
I'm going to take it there. Don't worry.
Is that, you know, a lot of Americans or a lot of folks thought that we had arrived, and, you know, we lived in this post-racial society where we have a person of African descent who has been obviously elected Supreme Court justice and then got elected president. You know, we've arrived, but we quickly learned that we haven't arrived, and I guess I could go into a number of different instances.
Yeah.
You know, Obama might have been treated at least a little bit differently than past presidents, and, you know, when you have Obama for 8 years and, you know, you now have the current administration, and the current administration sometimes seems as if it's a sharp contrast. We know that we haven't arrived. This is where sex educators and therapists and counselors, where, you know, we need to roll up our sleeves and go out into these communities and get on the airways and have conversations around social justice.
Right.
But if we've never practiced that, what are we doing?
Right.
What are we doing?
Right. And I think some of the and I'm just going to call it what it is. Some of the racism that is so deeply institutionalized is, I think, so below the radar for so many people. We talk about, and I'll throw this out there very politically, when we talk about especially the Republican Party, who likes to use the label the family values party, that they love to take on that mantle, that they're all about family, and it's all about family, and family this, family that. Yet, when you look at their actions, I have to say there's a qualifier. They're all about family as long as those families are white.
Yeah.
Right.
When you look at their policies, when you look at their actions, when you look at the decimation of just black and African American families, because you have the head of a family who is sent to jail for a slight infraction,
Right.
that a non-color counterpart would never have that with.
Because you have a for-profit prison system now. That's,
Exactly.
Right.
When you look at health care.
You have DACA
Sure.
tearing families apart.
Sure. Yeah, they think nothing of taking some of these families, and even if the children were born here, they will take the parents away and send them back, forcing the kids into foster care. Right? So where's the family value?
And well, there's certainly the social injustice, and I love it when we can connect sexual health, whether it's the role of women and the place for women at the table of life. James, tell us a little bit about the evolution of how you came to found the Journal of Black Sexuality and Relationships. And
Okay. So when I was at UPenn, and we had to obviously do research projects. I don't know, the literature that was being given to my cohort, none of it had any relevance to me. And so I would look for different articles as it relates to African Americans or different ethnic populations or whatever, and I'd have to go from this person, go to this journal to that journal or whatever. So when I finished, years after I finished, I wanted to write a book called Black Sexuality. And there were a number of folks who had written a book around the intersection of race and sexuality who came before me, and those people are Robert Staples, Lon Battles, Sandra Barnes, and a few other folks. And so I figured I'd try and do it myself. So I sent out for a call for manuscripts, and I ended up getting like 4 or 5 chapters that people were interested in writing. But on a flight between Philadelphia to Dallas, I was like, well, look, I don't want to do another book like somebody else has done. I want to see if I can do a journal, and not knowing what I was going to get myself into.
nice.
Because I wanted to have an ongoing collection of manuscripts and publications devoted towards race and sexuality. So must have sent out like 15, 20 proposals to different publishers, and one publisher got back to me and they said, oh, this is great or whatever. But then I didn't hear back from them after that. And then so I was like, well, if I got this quick response, and it was fairly fast, why don't I send out another 15 to 20? So I sent out another 15 to 20 proposals. The University of Nebraska Press got back to me and like, oh, this is great. Let's go for it. Who's on your editorial board? And I was like, uh-oh. So I got online, and I was looking for folks all across the country who have done research on, the sexual health of persons of African descent. And I think the original board must have had maybe about 13, 14 people. And, it was ready, set, go. So the first issue came out, a solid 3 years ago, because we're in the 4th year. And
Nice.
the editorial board has grown to 30, and we got a nice waiting list of folks ready to step in, and we have a nice number of ad hoc reviewers. And the journal is produced quarterly. It's an interdisciplinary journal devoted towards the sexual expression of persons of African descent or people who work with persons of African descent. And I will say that the journal has also given rise to the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians. So during that first year...
And the conferences.
One of my colleagues said, well, James, you have all these folks, interested in the journal. Why don't you try and get folks together?
Nice.
So I was like, all right. so I kind of shoot from my hip. You can tell, without a plan. So I hired an event planner, and she found some space in Philadelphia. And, we got a contract, but we didn't even have a name to the damn organization. So I took it back to my board. I was like, all right, folks, we need to get a name. So we voted on the Association of Black Sexologists and Clinicians, and then wrapped an LLC around it, and away we go. So we had our first conference about 3 years ago, and we had 150 people in Philadelphia, and then our next conference was in the Virgin Islands for our Spring Roundtable Series, and we ended up having about 25 folks there.
Beautiful.
And we met in Florida down in Fort Lauderdale, and then back in the Virgin Islands, and then we went to Cape Town, South Africa for our first international lecture series. We'll meet again in Chicago at the end of the month, and then the Virgin Islands
and St. Thomas
Roundtable Series.
I'm going to make that one.
And then we'll meet over in Prague, in the Czech Republic.
Oh, wow, very nice.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So we are all over the globe, and it's great. It's great.
Excellent.
I've had people ask me, do they have to be black to attend? And I say no. I said just be prepared to come in and talk about race and sexuality. And it's such a welcoming and affirming environment where, people present and you don't feel like the weight of the world is on you. And, we do try to have our conferences in destination places. Although we are going to be in Chicago. Not Chicago. But what's cool is that, we go and present, and our folks go and present, and then after that, we'll see you on the beach for a cocktail and laughs and
make that community.
Carnival week.
Yeah.
It's Carnival week, and folks stay or don't stay, it's good.
Nice.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can I ask you kind of a devil's advocate sort of question?
Sure.
Because I'm glad you sort of quickly followed up what you were saying too. They're saying you don't have to be black to be part of the association, and certainly to I think contribute to the journal and things like that. But something that I've been asked a lot. It's kind of funny that they would ask me things like this. But are people who may not be of color but are advocates and working on behalf of people of color as well, are they seen as equal partners as opposed to just representing the problem?
You're totally invited. And we've had a few people who are white or Caucasian attend our events, and I don't know, they've offered raving reviews about it. Like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Where sometimes you go to a conference and it may be too stuffy or doesn't feel like it's functional. It's great, and it doesn't become like, oh, you bad person because you are part of the majority or you're white. I can't believe you did. It's not even that kind of part. It's really not.
Well, hopefully I will. I'll see you before then. But I'm planning on making the St. Thomas conference this year, and I'm afraid we got to bolt. But we're so glad to have you with us this evening. And
so nice talking to you.
Really, what you're doing to move the conversation forward is historic, and
it really is.
It's an honor. It's an honor to work with you. Join us next week. As I said, our guest will be the renowned and notorious Dr. David Lay. I'm Richard Siegel, certified sex therapist.
Larry Siegel,
brother,
clinical sexologist.
Keep the conversation going, and we'll see you next Monday at 9 o'clock for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Indeed. Have a great week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with Dr. Richard Siegel. Join us every Monday night at 9 on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions